May I welcome to the stage Susanne Janssen, Professor Ien Ang, Annelien Bredenoord.
Dear Rector, Professor Ang, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to honor the outstanding scholarly contributions of Professor Ien Ang today. Ien Ang is a distinguished professor of cultural studies at Western Sydney University, where she founded the famous Institute for Culture and Society. She was the first person to receive the title of Distinguished Professor at this university in acknowledgement of her excellent scientific work and her eminent contribution to cultural studies. Dr. Ang is also a fellow of the Australian Academy of the Humanities, and she is the recipient of numerous Australian Research Council grants. Ien Ang published many highly original and thought-provoking books, which appeared in multiple languages. Her research monographs, Watching Dallas and Desperately Seeking the Audience, are widely recognized as classics in the study of media and popular culture. These groundbreaking works have greatly inspired students and researchers across the globe to take fans of popular culture seriously. Many scholars have followed her lead in striving for an open-minded, unprejudiced approach when examining the preferences, viewpoints, and behaviors of different audiences and social groups. Ien Ang herself has always continued to take the perspectives of different people and cultures seriously in her work, also when she turned her attention to new research areas, such as the challenges posed by cultural diversity and issues of the identity in an era of globalization and diaspora. This resulted in more groundbreaking publications, such as On Not Speaking Chinese, Living Between Asia and the West, which was inspired by her own experiences as a person of Chinese descent, born in Indonesia and raised in the Netherlands. In this book, Professor Ang gives a lucid account of the tensions between Asia and the West, as well as the challenges and importance of realizing togetherness in contemporary globalized societies. In her recent work, Professor Ang offers important insights about contemporary Asia and the changing New World Order and the relations between Australia and Asia, as well as theoretical and methodological issues. In her study of international cultural relations between Australia and Asia, Ang and her colleagues critically examine cultural diplomacy and the hype that surrounds it, and explore whether there can be such a thing as a cultural diplomacy beyond the national interest. In Chinatown Unbound, she provides a sophisticated view of new and evolving identities in Sydney's Chinatown, a view where diversity and transnational mobility provide the new normal, provoking, in doing so, substantial theoretical and empirical recalibration. Her most recent work focused on the development of a transnational approach to migration heritage and the development of tools and concepts for broadly documenting and analyzing Australia's migration heritage. The key themes of Professor Ang's work are also central to research and education within the Erasmus School of History, Culture and Communication and the Erasmus Initiative Vital Cities and Citizens. Both her work on audiences and her research on issues of globalization, migration, identity, diversity and urban cultures are highly relevant to our staff and students. But Ien Ang is not only a leading scholar in these areas and cultural studies worldwide. She's also a forerunner in interdisciplinary cultural research spanning different areas of the humanities and social sciences. Moreover, she is a champion of collaborative cultural research aimed at creating positive societal change. To advance more inclusive policies and practices, she engaged in partnerships with a variety of organizations, such as the City of Sydney, the New South Wales Heritage Migration Centre, the Special Broadcasting Service, and the Museum of Contemporary Art. Last but not least, Dr. Ang has distinguished herself as an inspiring role model and mentor to younger scholars and PhD candidates. Her work exemplifies and sets a standard for what we aim for in our research at Erasmus University, advancing interdisciplinary teamwork, addressing major societal issues through research collaborations with societal partners, and promoting diversity and inclusion in academia and society at large. For all these reasons, we are grateful and proud that Professor Ang will become an honorary doctor at our university. Now we start with the formal words. Yes. By virtue of the powers invested in us by statute and in accordance with the decision of the doctorate board, we hereby confer upon you, Ien Ang, the title of Doctor Honoris Causa, together with all the rights which statute and custom attach to this degree. As a token and proof thereof, we present you with the corresponding charter, as duly signed and sealed, and clothe you with the kappa. Okay. This is yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it works. Thank you. Also on behalf of the Executive Board and the Erasmus University, we would like to congratulate you, and also we are grateful that you were willing to accept this and also to fly in. It was quite a flight, wasn't it? Congratulations, and also here the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
think
give
we
you
have
the
to make a
diploma
picture.
still.
Yeah. Oh.
Yes. He gives a sign that the picture is okay.
It's
so
okay.
Go ahead. Yeah. Thank you.
Prepare for this. Well, dear Rector, dear Professor Janssen, friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so pleased to be here. And I am especially honored for being able to speak to you today to celebrate the 109th Dies Natalis of Erasmus University Rotterdam. Now, even though I've lived in the Netherlands a long time, Rotterdam is not a city I know very well, but I am pleased that I'm becoming more familiar with it. The city where I live now is on the other side of the world, Sydney, the largest city of Australia with a population of more than 5 million people. Every city has its own local specificities, whether historical, economic, social, or cultural. But across the world, cities today share similar challenges. Challenges that have become more pertinent and complex as the world faces a daunting set of crises and unprecedented change. Rotterdam and Sydney may be worlds apart, but in both cities, people's lives and livelihoods are increasingly unsettled by the impacts of climate change, the energy crisis, or the intrusion of ever more powerful technology in a context of widening social inequalities and rising global geopolitical tensions. As a result, there is a strong sense of cultural anxiety and discontent, a general dread of what the future holds. We can see this in the fraying of mutual trust and in a decline of community well-being and social cohesion. These are not really new problems, but they are more pronounced and pervasive today as the 21st century progresses. In this precarious situation, people need to be resilient enough to navigate the complexities of the present and to face the predicament of the future. Without such resilience, as we've already heard from Professor Janssen, we won't be able to respond constructively to the profound uncertainties and disruptions we are likely to encounter in the decades to come. Usually, these issues are discussed as national challenges. This is certainly what some authoritarian politicians tell us, who whip up the masses by claiming they will make their nation great again. They would say, for example, that Dutch culture or Australian culture is under threat, and that the national culture needs to be protected. But inward-looking nationalism is not what the world needs now, given that many of our problems, such as climate change, have no borders and can only be addressed on a global scale. Such defensive nationalism only makes people paranoid, which is the opposite of resilience. It is in today's large cities where the shortcomings of a strictly nationalist perspective becomes crystal clear. One of the issues that cities such as Rotterdam and Sydney have long grappled with is the increasingly diverse makeup of their populations, in large parts as a consequence of immigration, which has accelerated significantly since the beginning of this century. In Rotterdam, for example, which has a population of more than 600,000, more than 50% of the population is of immigrant background, while 70% of Rotterdam's youth have migrant origins. In metropolitan Sydney too, almost 50% of residents were born overseas, although this figure is higher in some parts of the city, such as Western Sydney, where my university is located. Almost 42% of Sydney's residents speak a language other than English at home. Such figures demonstrate the urban reality of what scholars call superdiversity. Both cities can count up to 200 different nationalities in their midst and are therefore veritable world cities. Such world cities are highly heterogeneous transnational places where any idea of a strictly national culture is transcended. Rotterdam, for example, is so much more than just a Dutch city. Its urban fabric exceeds the traditional confines of cultural Dutchness, just as Sydney's urban culture exceeds the dominant parameters of Australianness. But there seems to be a difference in the self-understanding of these two cities in this regard. While Sydney often boasts about its own superdiversity and, at least superficially, accepts its status as a cosmopolitan city of migrants from all around the world, Rotterdam seems to be less at ease with the diversity brought about by generations of migrants. This is demonstrated by the relative popularity in this city of populist parties with a strong nativist anti-migrant bent, indicating a discomfort in Rotterdam about diversity and a less welcoming attitude towards culturally different migrants. And this despite the fact that Rotterdam has a highly regarded mayor of Moroccan descent. I would argue that to nurture more resilient communities, such polarizing attitudes towards others who are different need to be overcome. This is not just a question of combating racism or of integrating migrants more into Dutch culture. What the city needs is to see that heterogeneity is an inherent advantage, bringing new ideas, new opportunities, and a richer cultural life, and to foster a sense of belonging for all residents, no matter who they are or where they come from. This includes the native Dutch population, which, after all, is itself increasingly becoming a minority in the city. In transnationally heterogeneous world cities, everyone needs to be more open to difference for society to be living peacefully together and to look confidently towards the future. World cities such as Rotterdam and Sydney have the potential to build such resilient communities. Communities will be more resilient when they are ready to share different resources, accept intercultural togetherness, and are willing to learn from each other as part of the habits of everyday social life. Making this happen takes effort, and much of my research has focused on contributing to this effort. In Sydney, I have worked with cultural institutions such as museums to open themselves up to a much wider range of people than they usually do, and facilitate the participation of diverse people in sharing their stories and knowledge across different publics. Museums are often overlooked as institutions that can play an important role in shaping community attitudes and senses of belonging. Museums are more than just tourist attractions. They should be positioned as essential urban, cultural, and educational infrastructure. As cities are looking to address the challenges of the future, museums are one asset they can use to bring people together, give them opportunities to express themselves and listen to others, and create inclusive, shared spaces for reflection, deliberation, and engagement. I hope that my research has been useful in some ways to highlight the essential role of cultural institutions in pursuing the goal of fostering resilient communities for the future in Sydney and in other cities, including Rotterdam. Once again, thank you so much for giving me this honor and recognition. Thank you.